The stars had always called to humanity, promising wonder, knowledge, and maybe even companionship. So when the Galactic Council made contact, Earth erupted in celebration. Alien ships hovered over capital cities, offering peace, technology, and inclusion in a sprawling interstellar civilization. It was the culmination of every dreamer's prophecy, every scientist's hope. The Council sent emissaries, creatures of every imaginable form, crystalline minds, insectoid diplomats, gaseous scholars held in containment suits. Among them were the Zaltari. They came bearing gifts of advanced medicine, nanotech, and most importantly, the promise of immunity to the ailments of deep space. The first step of integration, they said, was inoculation. They called it a universal vaccine, a safeguard against interstellar pathogens, Earth accepted. Why wouldn't they? It was standard procedure, the Zaltari insisted. Earth's governments approved it. Distribution began. It wasn't long before the first deaths occurred. At first, the symptoms mimicked a severe flu. Within days, patients bled from the eyes, vomited black sludge, and suffered seizures that shattered their bones. Then the screaming began, waves of agony no painkiller could touch, as the virus broke down neural pathways one cell at a time. Hospitals were overrun in a week. In 2, the global death toll was in the millions. By the 3rd, mass graves couldn't be dug fast enough, cities locked down, but it didn't matter. The virus mutated every 48 hours, immunity was a myth, nations crumbled. Then came the footage. A whistleblower, one of Earth's ambassadors stationed on the Zaltari homeworld, released secret communications. The virus wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. A calculated strike cloaked in benevolence. The Zaltari saw humans as unpredictable, emotionally unstable, and dangerously adaptive. They feared what humanity might become once they understood galactic politics, so they made a choice, a preemptive extinction. Earth had been given its first taste of galactic diplomacy, served through a syringe. It didn't take long for the truth to spread, even faster than the virus. Trust evaporated. The other alien races distanced themselves from the Zaltari, but offered no help to Earth. Not because they condoned the genocide, but because they feared what humans would do once they survived it. If they survived it, for months Earth burned, cities became crypts, communications fell silent. Orbiting satellites showed nothing but plumes of fire and shadows of mass graves. From the outside, it looked like extinction had succeeded. The Zaltari declared Earth quarantined to contain the outbreak, but in reality, they had written humanity off as a failed experiment. They didn't know what had taken root in the ruins of Earth, because beneath the silence, under the ash-covered cities and disease-ridden air, something ancient and primal awakened in humanity. Not fear, not despair, something else, defiance, deep within bunkers beneath what used to be Colorado, in the drowned ruins of Tokyo, in the still, glowing embers of Berlin. Humanity wasn't dying, it was adapting, rallying, learning. The virus wasn't a curse, it was a message, and humans had heard it loud and clear. They had underestimated human resilience. Again, what the Zaltari didn't count on, what no species in the galaxy ever seemed to understand, was that humans don't go quietly. Even at the edge of extinction, with bodies piling up faster than they could be buried, humanity did what it had always done best. It fought back. At first, it was scattered. Isolated scientists working by candlelight and backup batteries in makeshift labs. Medical students in underground hospitals risking exposure to dissect the infected and map the progression. Military bioengineers coordinating with rogue hackers and smuggling networks to scrounge together enough tech to analyze alien biostructures. These weren't coordinated efforts, they were acts of desperation, but desperation when repeated by millions of people across a burning world, becomes something else. Somewhere in the ruins of old Moscow, a research team led by a virologist named Elena Markov cracked part of the genome sequence. What they found confirmed humanity's worst fears. The virus was artificial, built on nanoscopic code signatures unique to Zaltari biotech. This was a weapon, custom, engineered to interact with human DNA and mutate rapidly enough to prevent a natural immune response. But there was something else. The virus wasn't perfect. In their arrogance, the Zaltari had embedded control sequences, and structures designed to interact with their own nanotechnology, traces of a failsafe. A weakness. Within a month, the fragmented network of surviving labs across the globe began to unite. Not physically. No, the world was still too dangerous for that. But through secure underground networks, through coded data relays bounced through abandoned satellites and jury, rigged weather balloons, humanity shared what it learned. Piece by piece, they reassembled a map of the virus. Piece by piece, they began to reverse, engineer it. The first prototype was a disaster. It killed the infected faster, but didn't stop the spread. The second slowed the mutations. The third activated dormant immunity genes in a select few. The fourth changed everything. It didn't just cure the virus. It rewrote the human immune system. The infected began to recover, slowly, painfully, but they didn't just return to their old selves. Something was different. They were stronger, faster. Their bodies healed in ways that defied known biology. The virus had triggered something deep in the human genome, something long dormant, buried under millions of years of evolution. For the first time, humans weren't just surviving, they were evolving, but it didn't stop there. One research team in what used to be Cape Town found that by modifying the virus's control code, they could weaponize it. Not just to infect, but to infiltrate, replicate, and destroy Zaltari tissue. The virus was a weapon. Now, it had become our weapon. Humanity didn't just find a cure. They built a biological counterattack. The question was no longer, can we survive? But what do we do now? There were arguments, factions. Some called for rebuilding quietly, isolating Earth forever. Others wanted peace, diplomacy through strength. But the ones who won out, the ones who took command of the satellites and the remnants of Earth's military fleets, were those who remembered the screams, the mass graves, and the laughter of the Zaltari as they declared Earth a footnote in galactic history. They didn't want peace, they wanted retribution, and they had just found the means to deliver it, faster than light, when the first Zaltari warship dropped out of orbit, burning, screaming, hemorrhaging fluid into the void. The galaxy noticed. It was supposed to be untouchable, one of the great dreadnoughts of their armada, an apex predator in a sky full of prey. But it wasn't the ship's destruction that terrified the Galactic Council. It was how it died. There was no fleet, no barrage of kinetic projectiles, no superlaser slicing through hull and bone. There was only a whisper, a biological code, a reprogrammed virus. The same one they had created to annihilate humanity had returned to them, but now it was no longer a virus. It was a message, and that message was written in agony. When the Zaltari ship decompressed mid-maneuver over Lytton's star, the footage went viral. Internal cameras showed warriors convulsing, bleeding from their second set of lungs, screaming in harmonics so high pitched they shattered their own bone plates, their organs liquefied, their command systems short-circuited. Entire decks turned to rot before they could even issue distress calls. Within 14 minutes, 12-0 Zero crew members were dead. Humanity hadn't just sent a message, they'd delivered it with surgical precision. But it wasn't the only attack. 6 more dreadnoughts fell within days. Each time, no shots were fired, no soldiers deployed. The vessels simply died, and with each one, another piece of the truth became clear to the galaxy. The virus was no longer just biological. It was digital, quantum, entangled. It rode signals, found weaknesses, learned and adapted. Humanity had weaponized adaptation itself. The Council convened an emergency summit. Species that hadn't agreed on anything in 6-0 cycles suddenly found themselves unified in terror. How did they do it? They asked. We thought Earth was in ruins. We thought they had no fleets, no colonies, no support network. They didn't understand, because what humans had wasn't born of fleets or technology. It was born of rage, of grief, of loss. Every parent who buried a child, every city turned to ash, every heart that broke watching the stars fall silent as the Council turned their backs. The Zaltari thought they could extinguish humanity. Instead, they lit a fire so bright it burned across dimensions. A clandestine transmission reached the Council from what remained of Earth's orbital array. It was short, just 2 words, now watch. The next day, they did. The main Zaltari cloning facility on Earth, Varn, exploded from within, not from bombs or sabotage, but from cells rebelling against their own code. The virus had rewritten the genomic keys embedded in every embryo. Their own soldiers unborn themselves in genetic revolt. The nursery collapsed. 2 million future warriors gone in seconds. The virus wasn't spreading anymore. It was evolving on its own. Council scientists dubbed it Sentinel Strain, a self-correcting, semi-aware biological network. Wherever Zaltari DNA existed, it could find a foothold. It remembered the hands that had crafted it, and it hated them. By now, humanity wasn't asking for apologies. They weren't negotiating, they were watching. They let the virus speak for them. Council worlds began closing ports. Bio-quarantines went up, embassies shuttered. Entire galactic trade routes rerouted around human space, not to protect the humans, but to avoid being caught in their wrath. No one wanted to say the truth out loud, but it spread faster than any virus. Humanity had won, not through firepower, not through diplomacy, but by turning the greatest weapon ever used against them into a scalpel that could cut down empires with a whisper, and they had only just begun. In the quiet shadows of Jupiter's orbit, the humans watched. They didn't celebrate, didn't gloat, didn't even send warnings anymore. The war was no longer about retaliation. It had become something colder, more calculated. The Zaltari had launched a biological weapon to erase humanity, confident in their genetic supremacy. But they had forgotten one fundamental truth. Humans don't go extinct quietly. The virus the Zaltari had engineered, code named Grey Rain, was meant to infiltrate human DNA, to corrupt the immune system from the inside out. It was elegant in a monstrous way. It bypassed defenses, tricked cells into compliance, and rewrote biological commands as though it had always belonged. But they didn't count on human stubbornness, nor the dark genius of Earth's survival instincts. What happened next was nothing short of horrifying. Human scientists, forced underground as the virus ravaged Earth's surface, had no choice but to study it. They couldn't destroy it. It moved too fast, replicated too smartly. So instead, they learned from it. They dissected its code strand by strand, marveled at its design, and then re-engineered it. The key wasn't stopping Grey Rain, it was teaching it. They renamed the mutated strain Judgment, a virus with duality, both the cure and the weapon. Judgment could restore a human ravaged by gray rain or rip apart a Zaltari with horrifying precision. Where the original virus had been biological, Judgment became synthetic. It was paired with nanoscale delivery systems, adaptive AI, and a central learning core housed in the lunar arc. The scientists didn't just save humanity, they evolved it. But the true breakthrough came when they realized Judgment could do more than kill. It could erase not just life, but legacy, genetic markers. Lineage, the strain didn't leave bodies. It left nothing. No bones, no records, no echoes in the genome. The first target wasn't a battlefield. It was a library. Deep beneath the Zaltari capital, their greatest genetic archive was sealed beneath 100 meters of obsidian vaulting. Inside were millions of years of biological data, seeds of entire species, records of every experiment the Zaltari had conducted on lesser civilizations, including Earth. One human courier, a clone designed to appear Zaltari, delivered a vial. In 3 hours, the archive was gone, every organism inside reduced to sterile carbon ash. Even the walls began to flake and disintegrate, as if they remembered what had been stored there and refused to carry its weight any longer. The message was clear. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about erasure. This was about reminding the galaxy that humans, when pushed to the brink, didn't just survive, they adapted. And when they adapted, they didn't just retaliate. They rewrote the rules. The council panicked. They convened war rooms, debated containment fields, summoned ethicists and strategists and doomsday prophets. They sent peace envoys. They sent bribes. They even offered Earth a seat on the high table. But Earth didn't answer, because Earth wasn't in charge anymore. The humans weren't governed now. They were united by loss, bonded by fire, and led by something far more dangerous than politics or ambition. A shared memory of being targeted for extinction. And now they had the means to respond in kind. Judgment spread not as a plague, but as a choice. Every Zaltari world that had once cheered their cleansing of Earth now watched their skies in silence. Judgment didn't require armies. It didn't knock on the front door. It simply arrived, and when it did, it remembered. The first test of Judgment in open combat came not on a battlefield, but in orbit above the scarred world of Kyrlan Prime. The Zaltari had fortified the planet into a military citadel, confident it would serve as the linchpin in their campaign to retake dominance after the failed viral attack on Earth. From space, it looked invincible, ringed with orbital weapons, shielded with layers of defense platforms, and garrisoned by over 4 million troops. Humanity sent a single ship, not a fleet, not a carrier or battleship. Just one. It was called Deliverance. Zaltari sensors picked it up immediately. It didn't match any prior configuration. No known weapons arrays, no shielding systems, just a sleek obsidian hull with strange, pulsing lines of deep crimson, like veins feeding a beating heart. Warnings flared. Zaltari High Command laughed. They expected posturing, a show of desperation from a wounded species. They didn't realize what had arrived was not a ship, but a syringe. The Deliverance didn't fire weapons in the traditional sense. It didn't unleash plasma bolts or torpedoes. Instead, it opened its hull like a blooming flower and released a cloud, microscopic, silent, purposeful, judgment. It wasn't even noticed at first. No alarms went off. No one felt the shift. But within an hour, systems began to fail. Strangely, inconsistently, one defense platform drifted from orbit. Another's targeting system refused to lock on. Shields began dropping, not from overload, but because the power routing protocols had vanished. Even automated AI cores reported logic corruption. Not bugs, not errors, just absence. Like parts of their code had been deleted mid-sentence. Then came the biological effects. Zaltari soldiers started showing signs of confusion. Memory lapses, tremors, muscles refusing to obey. When medics scanned them, their bodies still seemed intact, but their DNA told a different story. Helices unraveled, protein structures failed to form. Immune systems collapsed without a fight. They weren't dying fast like from a weapon. They were being forgotten by their own cells. Piece by piece, they were being erased. It was psychological warfare wrapped in molecular horror. Panic took root across Kyrlan Prime. Orders to fire at the human vessel were shouted, but by then, the weapon systems no longer recognized targeting data. Entire crews aboard orbital stations turned on each other as paranoia set in, convinced of sabotage or betrayal. The true terror wasn't the destruction. It was the uncertainty, no explosions, no gunfire, just quiet disappearance. By the time the Deliverance departed, not a single shot had been fired by either side. The planet was intact, but the Zaltari had abandoned it. They fled in whatever ships still functioned, some even ramming into each other in desperate escape. What they left behind was a dead world, not in the physical sense, but in a far more profound way. A place disconnected from memory, stripped of identity. The world's databanks were gone, sterilized at the atomic level. Cities remained, eerily preserved, yet with no trace of who had lived there. It was the first true demonstration of Judgment's intent. Not merely to kill, but to erase presence, to wipe away not just life, but significance. The message was clear, broadcast on a repeating human frequency left behind like a tombstone. You sent a virus to end us. We sent judgment to make you forget you ever existed. Galactic reaction was immediate and profound. Dozens of species broke formal alliances with the Zaltari overnight. Some destroyed their own biological weapons programs in fear of provoking humanity. Others offered humanity tribute. A few, those who had remained silent when Earth cried for help, simply vanished, retreating into deep space, hoping to avoid Judgment's gaze. This wasn't war anymore, it was consequence. When the Galactic Accord was first formed, it was based on principles of cooperation, respect for sovereignty, and peaceful advancement of civilization across the stars. Humanity, new to the galactic scene, had barely scratched the surface of deep space travel when they were first invited to observe, but everything changed after the viral attack, the moment the Zaltari attempted to wipe out humanity through biological genocide. Earth survived, but it did not forget, and it did not forgive. The aftermath of the Judgment event on Kyrlan Prime sent ripples throughout the galaxy. For the first time, the Council was forced to confront a species that had not only survived their first interstellar war, but responded with such terrifying innovation that entire civilizations reevaluated their military doctrines overnight. But Judgment wasn't the final message, it was merely the prologue. In the months that followed, the humans extended a hand, not of peace, but of warning. They invited every species of the Accord to Earth for a summit. Not in orbit, not on a station, on the surface, in the ruins of old Shanghai, a city once devastated by the virus, now rebuilt with a towering monument of obsidian glass at its center, a symbol of memory, loss, and rebirth. The message was clear. Earth had changed. The sum, it was unlike any in galactic history. No interpreters were needed. Human AI handled universal translation in real time. No ambassadors were present. Only soldiers, scientists, and survivors. And the speech that followed, given by Admiral Selene Rao, head of Earth Defense Command, redefined the place of humanity in the galactic community forever. She did not speak of revenge. She spoke of balance. Humanity, she explained, had created something terrifying not because it wanted to, but because it had to. Judgment was not a weapon of war, it was a weapon of remembrance. A monument built from blood and brilliance, designed to ensure that never again would any species look at humanity and see only a weak, emotional race. You gave us extinction, she said, and we gave you consequence. Then came the most shocking declaration of all. The humans offered to share judgment not as a weapon, as a deterrent. They proposed embedding it into a new form of galactic law, one not written by the Council but enforced by it. A deterrence protocol to be applied to any civilization caught developing planets, scale extinction weapons. Not to destroy them, to erase them, to remove the idea of them. The Accord protested, debated, feared, but the logic was undeniable. Judgment was the first true interstellar consequence beyond destruction. It offered a form of galactic peace rooted not in diplomacy, but in accountability. In the end, the Council voted, narrowly, to accept the proposal. The Judgment Accord was born, and with it, the galaxy changed. Humanity was no longer the underdog, no longer the oddity. They had become the unspoken guardians of a new era. Their scientists, once seen as backward, were now at the heart of the Accord's Security Council. Earth, once a forgotten blue marble, now became the site of the new galactic archive, and the phrase Judgment Protocol was etched into every military treaty from the asteroid belts of Norith to the watery skies of Valuan Prime. But what truly cemented humanity's legacy wasn't the fear they inspired. It was the paradox they embodied. The species that had nearly been wiped out had created the most powerful safeguard for peace the galaxy had ever known. They had taken a virus meant to end their story and turned it into a chapter that would outlive them all.